Yes, all right. My name's Bruce Wilson. I'm 75 years of age. I was actually born in Sydney, but I came out here as an Aboriginal welfare officer in 1967 and married a local Aboriginal girl, and I have Aboriginal children living in the town. I left the welfare job. I wasn't in that job for very long because the board closed up, but I came back from Sydney after about 5 years to work with the Aboriginal organisations here. I was mainly a bookkeeper, working with the housing company and the CDP. So I've had a lot to do with the Aboriginal people in their efforts to better the life for the people living in this community. And I must say I've worked with some really very intelligent people, dark people, Indigenous people who would, I think, rate with any of the white politicians. I think of Paul Keating. I think we've got a few dark Paul Keatings here in this town. But I must say, I look back after these years. I got out of the political side of it and went to Sydney and lived. But I have been back in Brewarrina for about 20 years now. My story might be a little bit disjointed, but what I'm going to say, I have to sit down when I came back to Brewarrina when I'm here and think, now what were we trying to achieve all those years? Because everything we were fighting for to try and achieve hasn't happened. And it was really disappointing. And, you know, I really had to think, and I was thinking, well, we were trying to improve Aboriginal employment, you know, through the Aboriginal people were trying to get businesses here to create employment for the young Aboriginal people. They set up their own building company. We did that underhand. We set up our own building company here. I won't tell you because I can't remember how we did it. But at that time under ATSIC, they didn't understand. They had no people there to tell the people, this is how you run your business, you know. And they more or less tried to set up these things on their own. But I think what happened, the goalposts kept getting changed. It was too hard for the people. We've had a lot of brilliant young Aboriginal people who have died early in their life. They've died giving their life to their people.
You okay? Yeah. Would you like a drink of water?
No, look, I'll have a little drink. But look, I don't know if I can keep talking, but...
Well, maybe can you talk a little bit about how water is used in the community? Focus on the water that might not be
Well,
so...
I'd just like to say, and I'll get back, I think I can steady down. And it's been a shame. See, I think what's happened here is the government kept changing the goalposts, and now that the Shire has become the employer of Aboriginal people, and I don't know if that's good or bad, but they've taken off from where the Aboriginal people were. But, you know, I think possibly, I don't know, I think they've intervened with, it's just another level of government with the state government, and have taken, they said, no, well, we're not going to let the Aboriginal people run their own affairs, we will do it for them. And I think that's what's happened in this town. See, all those little buildings in the main of the town, there was the Aboriginal Legal Service, there was the Aboriginal Nambar Housing Company, and but they're all closed. They've taken that away from the people, you know, and they're empty. There's nothing there now. They're just empty.
And would you say, certainly for water management, most local people aren't really involved from what we're hearing in any decisions that are important to them?
That's right, dear. Well, what happened, I'd actually got involved. I was asked to go on the River Management Committee, which was the plan for the Barwon-Darling River Committee, the irrigation, you know, about the irrigation. And I went on as a Green rep, and I must admit I was only a reserve member on that committee, but I learned a lot about the river, things I didn't know. I had a list of all the irrigation licences all the way down the river, and I used to walk kilometres out, 10 kilometres out, just to see the pumps on the river, what was happening and whether they...
When was this, can I ask?
Yeah, that was in let me think there. Well, not too good, but I think it would have been around about the 2000,
Okay.
1999, 2000, 2001. But they talk about this plan came out in the Barwon-Darling River Management Plan came out in 2012. But I think I was only on the committee for about 2 or 3 years, and we just spent 4 years trying to work out, or the committee did, trying to find out what the average amount of water irrigators had drawn out of the Barwon-Darling River since irrigation began. It was how much an average amount of water taken out, and that was called the cap. And that was going to be, I think, the cap on how much water could be taken out in any one year, in any one irrigation year. And I might add, there were Aboriginal reps on that committee. Actually, the chap who was managing this, I got him on the committee, Roy Barker Jr. But what they were doing, we were more or less only, I think, a consensus thing for the state government, because we'd go to the meetings and they would give us the figures, because we didn't know what the figures were, how much water was being used here and how much water was being... I didn't even know what a regulated river was or an unregulated river was, but we learned about that. But another thing I want to say too, we never took into account in arriving at the cap or what the cap was going to be. See, we were going to our recommendations went to the state government, I think, in about 2012, we never took into account the global warming when we arrived at this cap figure, I was just, as I said, I think it was mainly consensus building where the government said, look, we've been to the community, and this is the figure we've come up with, to irrigate with. But
and even when that number was developed at the time, did you think it was
the right number? Yes, well, I must admit, I started dropping the bundle at that stage about I was having a bit of drama in my own life going on, and all my records that I had of those committee meetings got destroyed by the Housing Commission because I wasn't in the House, and I had all the records of those meetings, and but that was mainly my fault because I wasn't living in the House at the time. But
how did you feel when they set the caps and through that process?
Was it
a fair process?
At that stage, I thought. I thought this committee was good, because with just the fact that we were sitting down talking to the irrigators and the farmers, there was a consensus there amongst us, because I didn't think I could even sit down with cotton growers. And one of the biggest surprises I did get myself was, I thought, because I was a Green rep, on the committee, and I thought I was against the whole lot. I thought I was going to be against the farmers, and I was going to be against, because they don't like greenies, and I was going to be against the irrigators. But what I found was that the irrigators were out on their own, because even the graziers had turned against the irrigators because they could see how much water was being taken out. And I think they talked about this floodplain harvesting, where they could put levee banks across the floodplain. But that was, I think that could be the farmers too were allowed to do that, but as far as the cotton growing there, I'd just like to say I think the cotton growing on the unregulated rivers is unsustainable, and it's got to be stopped. Otherwise, nothing's going to change. They can lose through evaporation on their aquifer storages up to 2 metres a year of water. Just from the evaporation losses from aquifer storages, I think would be enough to probably run the river in a small way. Mm. And when this is happening all the way up at Cubby and all the way through the rivers, the river just can't handle it, this water being taken out. Mm. I think the farmers too, they should have had a riparian zone along the river where they're not allowed to graze their sheep or cattle within so many hundreds of metres of the river to protect the river. That's something that's gone by the wayside. I think this riparian zone the farmers, they say, oh, that's probably where you get more grass growing along the river, and they don't want to fence that off because they need it for their cattle and sheep. So they're grazing right down to the riverbanks, I suppose.
What kind of changes have you seen in the local area since you were coming out in the late 60s? It must have been quite a lot, I would imagine.
Yeah, dear, I think there has been a lot of changes. I think what happened too, some things happened. They had in 1967, they had the referendum about giving the Aboriginal people the vote and things like equal wages. And I think when that was carried, I think a lot of the Aboriginal people who were working on the farms as fencers or shearers and that, a lot of them, they were living on the properties, they actually lost their job because the farmers had to pay equal wages under that. I think that was part of that. I can't think the actual word what it was called, but the 1967 referendum. And it gave equal, and the farmers couldn't pay them the wages, so a lot of the Aboriginal people came into town. Dodge City was a big settlement. There was 32 homes up here of Aboriginal people, and that's when I was a welfare officer in 67. Now I think there's probably only about 6 or 7 homes out of Dodge City. All those people have gone or passed on. And the government had to start red schemes going, planting trees in the town because there were droughts were starting to come in, and planting trees, and a lot of people just got employment. Aboriginal people got employment planting the trees and doing things like that, government-sponsored employment program.
Do you remember what the health of the river and the land around here was? We've just heard stories
I
about
think at that stage,
land clearing picking up after that. So what was it like then?
Yeah, they're on that point. I think early in I don't know, I'm not an authority, but early in the change of the century, 1900s, I think there were teams of Chinese people brought out here to do massive land clearing, and they did that around. So this land clearing just been getting, it's been ongoing. But initially, massive areas of land were cleared by Chinese people brought out to ring bark the trees. And that was the start of it. They're still clearing land out here on the way to Coolabah.
Yeah.
And
what did the rivers look like when you first came?
Well, yeah, when I think the rivers, I think nothing great, because when I came, the doctor told me, he said, Dr. Lopes was a local doctor, and he said, I wouldn't swim in the river when it's not actually flowing. And then they were getting no flow periods in the river, stopping the river, because that's when the algae blooms grow. They increase when the river's not flowing. When the river's actually flowing, it's healthier. It's running.
When did the doctor warn you about blue-green algae?
That was in 1967 when I was here as a welfare officer. So blooms must have been starting then, I think, because I swim in the river a fair bit. I've swum through blue-green algae. It might have made me a little bit bald or something or other, I don't know. But so the algae blooms have been around, but seeing the river now in this no-flow situation here now is this is the worst I've seen the river. And if we had a big fish kill above that weir wall now, we wouldn't have an alternate water supply for this town, I don't think. The Shire is saying they're trying to sink bores for bore water. That's we're on the edge here as well. But thankfully we haven't had a fish kill in that weir. But I've seen fish dying in that river. I've reported it to fisheries because I walk along the river quite a bit. But so that could be another big problem. And that could happen tomorrow, a fish kill, and we'd be like Walgett. And we haven't even got a bore here for the town, I don't think.
Are you worried about the future for water here?
I am, dear. I am worried about the future here for the people. I think if the Aboriginal leaders had been given more leeway and more room to develop what they wanted to do, this town would be a lot better off than what it is now. They've got stacks of people working on the Shire. I think a lot, I don't want to say there's over-employment there, but I think that's what's happening. And
what kind of water do you see in the town at the moment? What are you drinking? What are people drinking?
I have luckily I've got a little tank. I've gone off the filtered water. I was drinking the filtered water, but I've got a little tank in my house, which I'm drinking. I don't buy water if I can help it. But if my little tank ran out, I'd have to go back onto the filtered water potable water coming from the shower. But it is a bit chemically, it tastes a bit, but even my tank water is not too good because the air conditioner water's flowed over into it a bit, and it tastes not too good. But I'd rather be drinking that than the filtered water of the town.
And when you say filtered water, that's treated river water, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. It's treated river water.
And Brewarrina doesn't have access to bore water if things
I don't think they have. I believe they're trying to get bores. Maybe they have, but it's not piped to. It's not piped. It's not an emergency supply we can rely on at this stage.
So you're completely reliant on the river.
We are. We're completely reliant on it. And as I say to you, I don't know. It could rain tomorrow. We could get 10 inches. It would lift the spirits of water, but we need probably 6 to 8, 10 inches of water. Of rain now, I think, to get this river flowing. But often, you'll get rain up in the catchment will come down. We don't get rain here, but that'll set that river flowing.
But we have heard from just the folks today, this time last year, water did come through, but it disappeared quickly as soon as everyone turned their pumps on. So sometimes it's not even how much water comes in, it's still how much is getting taken out, isn't it?
That's right, yeah. As I say, I dropped my bundle a bit on what was happening about with the river, and it's sad because I realised now, so we had our own environmental group with an Aboriginal name, and as I said, we actually got a grant to fight Clyde Ag. We got $100,000 to fight them in court. And we found out Beamery didn't even have a development application. Berkshire let them go ahead to develop Beamery without a development approval. Because they'd moved Beamery from the Brewarrina, the off-river storages, to Berkshire because they knew there was going to be a bit of opposition to Beamery here in the Brewarrina. So they moved to Burke, and apparently they just went ahead and did the development without approval. That came out in the Land Environment Court. And but anyway, now as I say, I don't know whether I was supposed to put these piezometers in the ground at Clyde at Beamery. I don't know if they were ever put in, but that was part of the judgment. They were supposed to do that. But as I said, I think, I don't know, with our little town here, there's a lot of politics, and it's not easy on anyone, Like, I think you'd find it'd be, I don't know, this is just, like the Barkindji people down there might be more vocal about the river than here because they're more of the one tribal group. They speak with the one voice. Bree here being a mission town, I think that's a bit difficult here. Even though there's a lot of opposition to what's going on, our little town has had special problems, I think.
Have you heard anything much from other folks about any health problems coming from using the river water here in town?
No, I don't think so. But I think with the Indigenous people, with their kidney failure and things like that, we've got one of the highest, very high rates here, and I put that down to possibly the water, drinking filtered water, chlorinated water and things like that they're not used to, and probably the non-Indigenous people as well. And also the diet, eating fatty foods and things like that, which they're not used to.
Well, and that's not really something we're looking at, is what people are eating, it's more what they're drinking. Gil, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to your work with the Commission. There's been a lot of discussion in the last 2 weeks that we've had with people about the water sharing plan. And I was wondering what your feeling is now, whether or not that has worked effectively or has not been kind to other than the irrigators.
Well, I'd have to say, I think when they first sat down to do the plan, I think their intentions were good. You know, we're all trying to do this thing, so everyone could possibly sit down and have a share of the water plus the environment. But the environment's changed, you know. The years have got drier and drier, and as I said, they didn't take into account global warming. So I think this cap of 212,000 or 200, I think they increased it up to 220 or 230 megalitres, can be taken out by is far in excess of what the river can handle, and health-wise, because we're getting the blue-green algae outbreaks and these fish kills are showing that the river is not healthy. And I think you know, I've been trying to think what can we do to turn it around, you know, and I listen to my Aboriginal friends, and they say, you know, there shouldn't be any irrigation going on out here, and I think that's what it's got to come on this unregulated river. We're not getting water from any dams that's stored. We can get water, but we're not for irrigation. And I think on this unregulated river, we've got to stop, especially the big irrigators using the big pumps, the cotton growers. Maybe the farmers can pump a little bit of water out to grow a little bit of lucerne for their horses and things like that. But no, I think there's got to be a major cutback in the amount of water being taken out, especially the way the global warming is. I can see the years are getting drier and drier out here. I walk through the old park and the trees are dying, things are changing, and we've got to change with it. We've got to cut back on the amount of water getting out of the river. Otherwise, these towns won't be here in a few more years, I don't think.
I'm a bit of a sociologist.
Right.
I'm interested in the dynamics of decision making.
Yes.
And I got the impression that from what you said, that on that committee,
yes,
the irrigators were somewhat isolated because I think you said even the grazers had turned against them.
Yeah.
How come it came out of that group, which presumably had a number of representatives who were opposed to? I had no idea what exactly was going on. I imagine the cotton growers were in there to irrigate, were in there to get as much as they can.
Yes.
But the balance of power on that committee, at least apparently, would have been against that. So how did it work out that they did so well?
Yes, well, look, I'm sorry, my memory, I do have trouble with my memory. I've been trying to think, and unfortunately I lost these records, but I don't think we sat down and passed motions on issues about things. We were mainly getting advice from the government, and I think the irrigators were isolated on that committee, as were the Greens too a little bit. But I heard, and I don't know if it's true, but I heard that the plan that we put to the government after 4 years, the government didn't accept that plan, and they even increased the amount of the cap on the river. I rang Water Resources only a few days ago, and they said, oh no, they did increase it by 70. I don't know how much the cap was increased by so many megalitres over what we had recommended to the government. Now that was news to me, and this chap from the department told me that, but I can't remember how much it was. So I think it have to be vested interest, you know, like a lot of these politicians probably have their superannuation invested into the cotton industry, you know, and they're a powerful lobby group, and I think and I think also with the grazing industry declining, the government is saying, well, we've got to have some money coming from somewhere. Cotton's the only thing that we can see a light on the horizon, money-wise, and I think that's what's happened.
And the ultimate decision makers may have been assisted to come to their decision by the lobbyists.
I think so. I think it'd have to be. I do. And I must admit too, on the committee too, like I know the Aboriginal New South Wales Land Council, they weren't represented on the committee. I did say we did have Aboriginal representatives on the committee, like local, 1 or 2 along the whole river. 2 there were, I think. But, they were talking a language that they didn't understand. A lot of the white people on the committee didn't understand either. It was mainly about megalitres. They didn't, what's a megalitre? And nothing holistic about the river, what the river meant to the Aboriginal people, things like that weren't talked about.
But in summary then, so for 4 years there was a community or a broad consultation process to develop a plan, and the plan that was submitted was then changed without people knowing about it.
I think it was. Yeah, well, that's news to me. I've only just found out about that, I must admit I did drop the ball on things, what was happening, but, I wish now we had been a lot more staunch in keeping, keeping tabs on things, like even our environment group is not working anymore, which is a shame because we used to have meetings in the park. We had an Aboriginal name, and I think that grant of 100,000 was the biggest grant an environmental group had got up to that stage, which was, but I'm only that's nothing really because. But I think now I wish I was a bit younger because. The things I'd like to do. I think we need to set up a big community garden here in town to grow veggies, fresh veggies for the people. But, it takes a lot of work and effort. And I'm running out of energy.
I hope you could get it started because that community
yeah, well, I think it'd be wonderful.
Great.
We should. And, there are a lot of younger people who will probably come in and would take, we've got land out of the mission. The mission, they got land there. And actually, they bought a property, these people, with a big B-class pump. They own a cotton pump, which has never been started. And now that licence is probably not worth a thing now, but it's still, we might be able to use that to start up a veggie garden or something. But anyway, look, it's been lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, and, thank you for coming in. We
and
really
thank you,
appreciate
people.
it.
We didn't know what was happening. But I want to encourage, keep fighting because a lot of the people out here have lost their voice, and we need people to fight for us, to try and turn things around, keep these towns going.
Yeah, well, we're keen to work with people wherever we can. So.
And I think the only way is we've got to be more holistic towards the river. I think I say this: we've got to listen to the Aboriginal people in their holistic ways, how to treat the animals in the river, because the white people don't understand it. They see a little bit of water running out to sea as wasted water. Yeah. They don't understand how nature works.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, we want to control nature and we can't. And until we learn that, things are going to go down.
Yeah. No, I agree. Thank you so much for your time, Bruce.
Yeah, right.
See you, matey. Have a good one.
So much.